Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're going to cover this week in cannabis from January 25th to the 31st. But before we jump in, if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, all I ask is that you leave a thumbs up on the video, as it really helps out my channel, and I do appreciate it. And then, of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss any new videos. And if you are not caught up and would like to know somewhere to start, I would recommend going back and watching the series I made called Reality Check Cannabis in 2020. Start there, and then you can watch episodes of This Week in Cannabis from October leading up to now, because basically I was anticipating the best case scenario for the election. Then the best possible case scenario ended up happening, so now I'm covering how soon we can actually see U.S. legalization come to fruition. So I'm very happy to announce that with the shift in Senate control means for cannabis policy reform is that, folks, for the first time in U.S. history, that Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, so the man in charge of Congress, of the Senate, he is the first one ever to publicly support ending federal cannabis prohibition, and he's made several commitments on multiple occasions to advance legislation to repeal the federal criminalization of cannabis. And I covered earlier this week, he was on CNBC with Rachel Maddow and admitted that cannabis would be a priority for social justice reform. So that is amazing. And then earlier this week as well, he was also did a live with former NBA player Al Harrington on Instagram, who is a cannabis entrepreneur now and owns the company Viola Brands. So Schumer and him talked, and I'll put the link for that interview below. It's a good 9-minute video, but it also does show that Schumer's intent is to completely deschedule cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act and not to reschedule it in there, which is fundamentally so important for Al Harrington and all the U.S. MSOs that have already established and put in so much work to build up this industry. So that is just something very promising that I want to point out. Now, I'll get back to that, but let's just show the difference between cannabis-friendly publications, the title that they'll put out. Chuck Schumer says cannabis reform bills are being merged as Congress moves to legalize, and then Senate Leader Schumer pushing federal cannabis legalization as a priority, whereas this one just says what the shift in Canada and Senate control means for policy reform. Like, you've actually got to really read and find this yourself, whereas this is at least saying, like, hey, Schumer's intending to do this. Let's pay attention. Now, a few things to point out, though, is that he is working to enact reform this session. And again, last thing I want to reiterate is that Schumer and Harrington said, so again, in this interview, Schumer reiterated that they both want to make it so that the FDA does not impose excess regulations on existing cannabis businesses when legalization is implemented. And that, again, would just be if cannabis does not get descheduled completely and it moves into another sort of scheduling. And the thing is, Republican lawmakers want that. Already in 2021, a Republican politician has filed a bill. Again, it wasn't voted on or passed or anything, but he filed one to move cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. So I want to reiterate how hopeful I am, and I trust Schumer will keep his word. But Schumer is also adamant in saying that he will not allow it to move from one schedule to another, and that we will completely deschedule it. Because again, that's what you need for U.S. cannabis to thrive, so that it's treated like tobacco or like alcohol, so that we can actually do the research that we need to find the therapeutic benefits as opposed to the harms. All of these good things come from Schumer sticking to his word, and he's saying he's going to do it. So all we got to do is be patient. Now, I'm not going to go through this because it says all the same things. You can read that in the description below, but I am going to jump over to this reference, this source that Todd Harrison, again, one of the OG cannabis investors, still very live on Twitter, posted from Stifel, which is a U.S. investment firm. This is a Goldilocks scenario for U.S. cannabis industry based off of what Schumer has been confirming and putting out into the world with his intentions. So we're going to find out. Schumer, along with Democratic senators and some Republicans, are crafting a federal cannabis reform bill that we view as a Goldilocks scenario. While significant risk to materialization remains, and saying that while significant risk to materialization remains, that just has to say that it's possible that this doesn't happen as soon as they're intending. But in our view, based on everything that Schumer is saying, and again, giving his word now that he's the most powerful person in Congress, this demonstrates 3 important factors that we are also hopeful. And we just have to trust that he sticks to this. 1, a legislative support level that builds on unprecedented momentum for pro-cannabis reform given the apparent bipartisan effort in current Democratic trifecta, increasing the probability of success, and that is Democratic President, Democratic Senate, Democratic House. 2 is the first time a federal bill has been discussed by one of the most powerful lawmakers in Congress. And 3, legislative leaders are likely discussed with industry stakeholders to understand the needs of cannabis operators while also taking into consideration unintended consequences such as over regulation in order to provide the most favorable regulatory environment possible while balancing social justice measures. This 3 is exactly what I believe Schumer did with Al Harrington, speaking this reform publicly out loud. Hence, this development could potentially foreshadow the most significant catalyst in the history of the U.S. cannabis industry. We are making history, folks. Now, outlining the scenario, what does this sound like Schumer's doing? It sounds like he's combining the Safe Banking Act and the States Act. What would that do? It would, 1, remove the 280E penalty, which these U.S. cannabis companies are paying right now, and removing that penalty would increase their free cash flow by 2 to 5 times what they're currently doing. Because basically, as of right now, because these companies work with a federal narcotic, they are suffering and paying a 50% effective tax rate. So in the scenario when legalization happens, and they would be moved and no longer have to pay this penalty down to a 30% tax rate, this would possibly give them 5x more free cash flow in their monthly or in their quarterly earnings. So basically all that means is that these companies can report more profit and they have to pay less tax to the government because cannabis will no longer be illegal, which is, again, better bottom line for these companies and investors like you and I. And then more importantly, though, this likely removes regulatory arbitrage, providing pathway for the largest re-rating. And this is what the Safe Banking Act, and again, what we want most importantly, the conflict between federal and state laws regulates or creates a regulatory arbitrage for U.S. cannabis operators as fewer investors have access to the CSE, the Canadian Securities Exchange, which I have, and OTC markets for U.S. investors. However, the alignment between federal and state laws, as we believe was proposed by Senator Schumer, could solve this problem, potentially enabling U.S. companies to uplist to U.S. major exchanges and increasing custodianship opportunities. Hence, we believe this could provide a pathway for significant re-rating of cannabis operator valuations, which, as we previously discussed, could be as high as 20 times from early January 2021 levels. That's 2,000% increase. And I just want to point out, the writing is on the wall, folks. Stifel is a U.S. investment firm that cannot invest in these U.S. companies because they trade on the OTC and cannot uplist on U.S. exchanges. So whether this is Stifel just saying, hey, when this legalization happens, this is what we intend to do. We intend to drive the valuations of these companies up because right now they're severely undervalued. Yes, we're seeing this from Stifel. We're seeing this from Canaccord and other investment firms as well. So this basically just tells me that this is foreshadowing what these investment firms plan to do the moment these companies can uplist. So it's, again, folks, reiterating why now is the best time to get in. Sit patient, wait. Now, Arizona's came as a surprise, legalizing recreational last week. And although they're seeing strong sales, this article mentions the possible supply issues on the horizon. But I want to dive into this article a little bit deeper just to point out why supply issues aren't going to be for everybody. So if you're invested in established MSOs that will not face these supply issues, you are golden. Why I reiterate as well that the big US MSOs, again, there's such a great margin of safety because these companies are undervalued and they are going to be the ones that can last long term. But we're going to jump straight down here to strong consumer demand. Arizona dispensary operators described a lively first week of adult use sales. Curaleaf, the second biggest Arizona operator with 9 licenses and 8 dispensaries, has seen early recreational sales worth between 2 and 2.5 times its previous daily medical sales. And their average basket value was roughly $85. And so Curaleaf was the one operator that was able to give a sales snapshot. So thank you, Curaleaf, for that. So again, we're talking about in Arizona, there are 2 really largely established MSOs, and those are that's Curaleaf, and then that's Harvest Health and Recreation. Whereas Harvest Health is Arizona's biggest player with 19 licenses and 15 dispensaries now open for recreational sales. I myself am invested in Harvest individually, and then I'm also invested in Curaleaf through the ETF HMUS. But to point out what Harvest is saying, this early rush tested the store's capacity in some locations, particularly in light of the situation going on. We did a good job of ensuring that our inventory was where it needed to be and to not have early supply chain issues. The Flower Shop, a medium-sized operator with 3 dispensaries, so again, only 3, much smaller, did between 3 and 3.5 times its usual medical sales. So flower comprised of at least 55% of early sales with an average basket of about 100. So again, this is a medium-sized operator saying we've been preparing for rec sales for the last 4 months. Our inventory has been bulked up by 3 times just anticipating the foot traffic. That is huge. Now, who's concerned over these possible supply issues? Who's really to be concerned? The small US MSOs that have, for example, Lilac Power, founder and CEO of a single license operator, Giving Tree Dispensary, offers a similar outlook. We feel like we are going to be okay for the first month or even 6 to 7 weeks, but after that, we're going to see some supply issues. And what they say is some operators in Arizona's vertically integrated market, and again, vertically integrated means that you're a larger MSO with cultivation there, distribution, and dispensaries, aren't wholesaling to others in order to prioritize their own store supply. Makes sense. Oh, so, I mean, giving tree dispensaries, obviously, like, I would love it if Harvest Health or Cureleaf would give us some of their wholesale so that, you know, they can make money off us and we can keep supplying the demand. But why would Harvest or Cureleaf give that up when there's so much foot traffic, right? So it's just, this is also when you realize going into business, how are you going to compete with the big dogs? And even Cureleaf, like Cureleaf Arizona's Cottrell said possible shortages are definitely a concern, which is why Cureleaf has invested in new cultivation capacity. Cureleaf is literally investing in more cultivation facilities to supply this demand, because when you jolt from an addressable market of 300,000 in medical people to an addressable market overnight of 6 million for adult use, yes, you're of course going to have a shock to the supply chain. So again, I just want to point out, though, that it does not seem, folks, that Cureleaf or Harvest are the ones dealing with supply chain issues. This will be the much smaller, the medium-sized to lower-sized MSOs. And again, that is just why investing in these established companies does give you a head start and a great margin of safety. And so again, just coming more from Harvest, these people who have made those moves are considering making those moves, I think are going to have an impact on supply in the wholesale market. My hope is that they will at least in part make up for the increase that we've seen in revenue. But yeah, sorry, he anticipates those who anticipate the supply shortage might not be accounting for cannabis companies from other states entering Arizona and cultivating or manufacturing under someone else's license. So there is a lot of uncertainty still, folks, in this industry, but the main thing is that once it gets going, clearly it's making a lot of money and it's supplying the demand. The last thing I want to point out, though, is I know we're only a week in this far, but from 7 to 10 p.m., there's a line at every Cureleaf store all day. It's a great opportunity for everyone that has a license. We are very privileged to be in this position. So again, I just want to reiterate, do not risk investing in these penny stock, cheap US MSOs when you can just get in to undervalued established ones early, and all you got to do is wait. Now, on contrary to Arizona coming out very early, we actually had New Jersey delaying and not being able to sign the bill that they intended to. But thankfully, New Jersey lawmakers approved a cleanup bill on Friday, which they intended, which cleared basically the issue that the Governor Murphy was facing. So he did not want to sign any sort of a bill because there were penalties there were penalties for underage possession, and he did not want there to be any penalties for kids under 18 that get caught with cannabis. And I just want to point out that that's a great way to do it, because in Canada, under 18, if you got caught with cannabis, even over 18, before we legalized, if you got caught with cannabis, the police would just take it and tell you to smarten up and think about what could have happened or what could have gone wrong. So yeah, fundamentally, not punishing them, especially not punishing those under 18, is the best way to go about it, because again, there's just no reason to. And as we research more and find out the therapeutic benefits, I think we're just all going to be amazed and surprised. But this is good, because New Jersey lawmakers can now sign this and get legal underway in New Jersey. Now, we're going to run through these quickly, because again, this is not a lot of these are not big developments, but these are just what we can expect coming through in the next year. But in 2021, we're expecting 5 medical cannabis markets could get a boost through reforms. This would be Minnesota, New York, Virginia, Texas, and Florida. What kind of reform can we see? Well, it appears in Florida, they're going to add out additional licenses, including for small businesses, and projected sales are at $1 to $1.3 billion. In Minnesota, the reform would be allowing smokable flower, projecting sales of $50 to $60 billion. New York, for medical as well, their reform is smokable flower with projected sales of $250 to $260. Now, I apologize. I should have done a bit more work in wondering how these states don't already supply flower. I don't know if they only supply vapes or concentrates. But again, I mean, any sort of reform is technically good, because again, this is a young industry in its youth phase, you could say, that's just learning as we go, and there will always be mistakes, but we continue to learn as we develop. And Texas potential reforms, THC increases, additional patient conditions, nothing projected yet. But again, Texas being open to this, that's huge. That's a $30 million market. And Virginia, potential reform of smokable flower, projected 2021 sales 9 to 11 million. So again, if you want to learn more, this link will be below, but this is hopeful, because any reform where medical is already legal is likely going to be a reform that improves the business practices. Now we're going to run through. Minnesota governor urges lawmakers to pursue cannabis legalization amid budget talks. So again, that is legalizing adult use so that you can bring in tax revenue, what all the states need. Now this was interesting. Cannabis possession could be legal in Virginia by the summer. Here's where the bill stands.
Line bill Today, a mammoth bill to legalize marijuana is under a microscope.
Good.
Some lawmakers now supporting legalizing adult possession by July of 2021.
Progress.
I think we're taking a responsible course. This is something that won't happen overnight.
Bill sponsor Adam Ebbins says legal sales will likely have to wait until 2024. That's because the Senate is backing the creation of a new agency to oversee the budding industry.
A new government agency to oversee the budget industry. Gosh, Virginia, way to ruin anything good you had going for it. Very unfortunate. So again, folks, we've highlighted states that do it well, like Arizona and Illinois. Others, Virginia, not so much. Now, thankfully, West Virginia actually has approved medical cannabis dispensaries, and they were announced on Friday. So where Virginia is at least talking about decriminalizing, which is, again, good because you're not going to go to jail, that literally does nothing to eliminate the black market. But what we can at least see is that West Virginia is taking steps to a responsible medical program. And going through this list, good or established MSOs that will be benefiting from West Virginia eventually opening up. Now, again, though, folks, this doesn't mean anytime soon. This will take time, but we see Columbia Care and Trulieve actually seem to be the biggest beneficiaries in West Virginia. So that's great to see. And Tennessee, there was a bill proposed that would decriminalize possession. So again, I mean, hey, this is good that you're not going to go to jail for being caught possessing cannabis. However, fundamentally, this does not impede the black market whatsoever, and this allows the black market to continue thriving. And I think we can all agree we are at a point where you just need to start taxing and regulating so that states can start, bringing in tax revenue and creating jobs because they need it more than ever. And that's it for the states. And just to run through what these MSOs have been confidently doing. Trulieve CEO hypes up new Florida dispensary. It's 73rd in the Sunshine State, so that is amazing. Curaleaf is happy to announce their first branded retail location opens in Pennsylvania. So again, as there's not news in the mainstream, you don't need to look at that because you just need to look at what these companies are doing, and they are all executing, and they should be preparing themselves to release some phenomenal numbers in February or March when they release their earnings. Cresco press release expands high supply brand portfolio to include 1 gram and 0.5 large cartridges in California and Illinois. And Green Thumb as well. Their Dog Walkers cannabis brand created the Bailey Legacy Fund to support animal rescue organizations, making donations to 5 nonprofits, totaling $34,000. Now again, do you see many other companies just in any other industries doing local initiatives like this? You don't. So again, folks, this is why I'm saying, I mean, I'm sure if you're here watching this video, you already understand and believe that this is coming and this is going to be a big change, but you want to see companies taking initiatives like this. These MSOs are phenomenal companies for the communities around them as well. So for all those American states that do not want to legalize yet, you don't know what you're missing, unfortunately. And lastly, I found another fantastic resource, mjstocktrader.com/cannabis investor portal. And here, I think it was updated last quarter. It's not live or anything like this, but another amazing resource which will tell you the U.S. cannabis fundamentals. It goes through the ticker, and again, this is not current share price. This is a bit old. So again, it's not a resource that you want to take as factual, but you want to use it with and compare it to what you know, or use it and compare it to some of the past earnings and the numbers that you can research yourself. Obviously, just to confirm, but it's got the prices, outstanding shares, market cap, quarter revenues, annual revenues, price to sales, and then price to future earnings, 2021, 2022, 2023, all of that good stuff. And these, again, are also US MSOs. So just to emphasize, these are the MSOs that will not see any sort of supply chain issues in states because they're big enough, they have enough cash, they're established enough to supply that demand. But it's unfortunately, I do think, folks, that getting into these MSOs down here is a little bit riskier just because they might not be able to keep up with demand, like if what happens in Arizona happens in New Jersey and in other states. Now, again, I could be wrong. I just want to point out why I do think that although obviously you don't want to get into the biggest companies, look at that. Harvest Health is trading at a price to sales of 6 multiple, Cresco 7. Looking at Trulieve's future price to earnings ratio, trading at a PE of 14 to their 2023 sales. Lots of opportunity here, especially when annual revenue growths are over 100%. Nonetheless, and just to scroll down though, you also get the list of dispensaries. So you end up finding out all of the US MSOs on the left side, which states they have dispensaries in. And this is, again, a great way to tell you, okay, which dispensaries are big enough, with enough footprint that should see gains over the next few quarters. And I leave this here for all of you to use to take a look, dive through, and hopefully find some good MSOs and some exposure that you can get into to start a position, hold long, and take advantage of this opportunity. Now, folks, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. Did I miss anything that you wanted me to cover? Let me know in the description. Let's start a conversation. But again, I think it's important to highlight the facts that Chuck Schumer, again, the man with power in Congress, intends to legalize cannabis. So all we got to do is trust that this man is going to stick to his word and be an honest person. And we will hopefully be rewarded for investing in this industry and getting in sooner than later. So thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, if you want to learn more about this industry, and I will see you next week for midweek update. Cheers.